Hello and welcome to the first inaugural Pound the Rock podcast. I'm your host, Katie Sloyer, and on today's episode, the topic of conversation is our core values. Please help me welcome my first guest, Josh Wilson.
I think we're on.
Cool. So our first podcast is officially started.
Woo! Your first podcast. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. You'd asked me if I'd been doing this about 8 years ago. I'd have said you were nuts.
What would you have said 8 years ago?
That I'm just going to be a coach in a closet somewhere and never going to do any of this techno crap.
All these things.
All these things. And now I'm doing all these things that I said I would never do, including being a dad for the third time.
Yeah.
So life has a funny way of grabbing a hold of you, I suppose.
How do you think you made it here?
I think I made it to where I'm at today because there was a point in my life where I decided that I needed to change what I was doing, and that was when my daughter was born, and that was a long journey. Spent a lot of time working at being very successful and doing a lot of things that gave me the skill sets that I have now, but none of those things were in service to anything other than myself. And when my daughter was born, all that changed and ultimately led to where I'm at here and what we're doing and why we're having this podcast and why we have Crossfit Stonecutter and why we are doing the things that we're doing here. So that was probably for me what started that journey, and what continued that journey was in each phase from the time my daughter was born coincided with probably a time in my life when it was rock bottom. And then when she was born, I had the opportunity to reset my entire life from the beginning and start the journey that brought me here. And I was able to take things that I learned before that and take things that I learned after that and help to create the values, the mission, and the goals of what we have that we're doing here, and then that guides what I do on a day-to-day basis. And then what that does is when people ask for crazy things like doing podcasts or starting the Phoenix group or doing the things that we've been doing here, it's very easy to assimilate and start doing those things and bring them into what you're doing because you have a mission and you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And if something aligns with that, then you can move forward and knock that out. If it doesn't, you don't. So that's how I got here.
Are you sad that it took so long, or are you grateful? Or
no, it's part of, you know, and it's a buzzword today. Everyone likes to talk about the process, but it's part of the process, right? When you find your process and you start using it on a daily basis and learn to embrace your process, these things happen. But I wouldn't be who I am without what I've been through. I mean, the sum of my experiences has created who I am from the time that I was, you know, a kid, being homeschooled as a kid, brought up in a very conservative Christian home, to being at a world-class level in Taekwondo, to going to college, to working full-time while I was in college, to rising up the ladder in corporate America, to losing all of that and destroying all of it with a bunch of bad personal and business decisions, having my daughter, dealing with the consequences of those bad decisions, and then basically rebuilding from ground zero and having to redefine my relationships with family, redefine my relationships with friends. You start to see how a process and a set of values is key to guiding what you do, and then acceptance of those consequences. So no, I'm not sad that it took me that long. I'm sad for the things, and you know, I daily regret the things that I've done wrong to people in my life. But by the same token, I cannot dwell on those things because there's nothing you can do about what you've done. You can only learn from it, and it is more of a disservice to sit around wasting time worried about what you've done wrong than by learning from it and moving on and doing good with the information that you've gained. Because failure and mistakes is information, and our relationship with that information and what we do with it is what is the most important thing. So for me, that answer would be no. You know, there are probably days you could ask me that question, and the answer would be, I wish I would have figured it out a lot earlier, but the reality is that no human being does. You know, most of us have to go through some period of time where we're figuring things out. And we're also going to go through times in our life on a regular basis that are rough. And then we have to figure those things out. But no, I don't regret that it took me that long to get here.
We always talk about like the process, right? And always being invested in the process and being more in love with the idea of what the process really is rather than the result, right? So now that we have Stonecutter and you've learned all your processes from your prior life, do you think your processes started over when you created Stonecutter, or do you think you actually utilized those processes and just kind of assimilated it into the gym to make sure that we are living up to the core values?
I think that's an interesting question, and the answer to it is that I am using things that I learned before after I learned to appreciate them. So one of the things that I had the great benefit of having when I was growing up was I had a great education, but I also had a very strong set of core values that I was raised with, and a very strong sense of what be defining yourself was, right? That part of that was defining what you believe, defining why you believe it, and then defining what you're going to do with that. Well, that was great, and I found that very empowering, but because I found that very empowering, I felt like I could do whatever I wanted. I didn't see it as this is the way you live and the way you think, and you have a responsibility and an obligation to do things a certain way. I saw it as, well, now I can just do whatever I want, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do whatever makes me feel good. And that was where I kind of went over the river and through the woods and away from what I needed to be doing. But when I had my daughter, when I started changing my focus from being intrinsically focused from a standpoint of I was going to do what benefited me, and being intrinsically motivated but externally focused, right? I.e., I made myself get out of bed every day and do what needed to be done, but it was for other people. It was for my kids. It was for the people that I worked with. It was for the people that I ultimately became the coach and became part of the community that I lead now. Those things are what changed for me. And so what I did was I said, okay, how am I going to do this better? Well, I didn't come up with the core values that we have for this gym out of the blue. Courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit actually are core tenets of Taekwondo, which was the martial art that I came up with when I was in high school. I've added two things to that, family and faith, for our gym. And I've taken those and built those here because those things represent to me fundamental principles that are universal regardless of your religion, regardless of your political standing, beliefs. I mean, you can't look at those core values and say that those aren't applicable in any situation and any belief system, because they are. And those tools, along with my personal religious beliefs and my personal view of the world, were what I went back and looked and said, okay, I know how to have a process and structure that is intrinsically motivated and externally focused. And so I'm going to go back to that. And first, I'm going to get my own house in order. Then I'm going to get my house in order with my kids. And then I'm going to see what I can do for the rest of the world with that. Well, that first part took a while. You know, it took 6 or 7 years. And then when I decided I wanted to get into coaching again and doing something with it and started going down the CrossFit, weightlifting, strength, and conditioning route, the reason I went down that route was I had seen so much good done for people who had the opportunity to connect and do better in an area of their life that allowed them to practice that process to apply it in the things that really mattered. Right? One of the concepts that I really have drilled into my brain from the years that I worked in corporate America doing mergers, acquisitions, and turnarounds, and from school and from training, was the idea of practice, right? We talk about this in our training all the time. You're competing sometimes, you're training other times, and you're practicing. Well, training and competing require volume, and they require a lot of effort and a lot of time put in at a high volume of work and a high volume of stress. Whereas practice, you put everything you can control. And it's like the most pure expression of controlling what we can control, right? So earlier, when they were talking about the fire at the office that I had in my at the other business, and you made the comment to Colby that I'm controlling what I can control. Well, that's what practice, in my opinion, is the purest form of, is controlling what we can control to get better at what we're supposed to get better at. And what a community like Stonecutter, or a community like a CrossFit gym or strength and conditioning gym, or a fraternity or a group of friends, or anything that's existing to service its members and do better, does is give you the opportunity to practice those, if it's a good one, and it has the right principles, to practice things that you need to be able to do in the real world. Not to say that this isn't the real world, but that you need to do at home with your family, or at work, or in, at your job, or with your probation officer, or with your estranged ex-wife, things like that, right? You have to have skill sets that you learned in here. And so for me, with every person that walks in this door, that I look at from a coaching perspective is, how can we better their lives through teaching them how to use a process? And that generally has nothing to do with what we do in here. I mean, yourself are an example of that, as well as many other folks. Now, you happen to be focused competitively as a CrossFit athlete, but those are tools that are going to take, you're going to take elsewhere out of here when you're done and go rule the world in corporate America. I mean, that's just what you're going to do with them. And when I look at you, just taking you as an example because you're sitting here, what I try to teach you as a competitive athlete not only prepares you for competing on the floor in that situation, but I also think about, how can I give her the tools when she's in the boardroom, or when she's working as an executive or trying to climb that ladder. What lessons does this teach her with that? The two things that guide my programming and coaching for you are those two goals.
Right.
Because you have that goal post all of this, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing for a lot of people. A lot of people don't know what their goals are when they come in. But to go back to your original question, what's driven me was going back to what I originally had, the luxury of, because of who my parents were, how I was raised, and the people that I met growing up, learning that the process was first and foremost what was important, and then appreciating that process. The one thing that I will say that's been consistent in me, even during times where I probably wasn't spending the most time doing things that were worthwhile, was I understood that it wasn't about the result.
Right.
You had to, the people who were really successful lived in making the process better because it was the only thing that was sustainable.
Well, in a society that we're so focused on results,
Right.
people are so driven. Like, I was just having a discussion about when we're teaching kids is goal setting, right? Writing down goals. Make sure you write them down. Make sure they're measurable, attainable, achievable, and trackable, right?
Right.
That's all results. It's no one ever sits down and says, "Hey, my goal is going to be to follow this process ABC up until November." Whatever the results may be is what they are.
Right.
Right. We're always like, "Want to me compete in a sanctioned event," for just CrossFit's perspective, right? Want to compete in a sanctioned event by 2020. That's a result. Mm-hmm. That's not a process. So I think we kind of get hung up on our results. And how do we get people to kind of frame more on the process, right? Like, I mean, coming from your background of Taekwondo, I feel like I don't know much about Taekwondo, but what I do know about the martial arts in general is that it's very rigid and strict on process, right? Like, they teach you all about the process, which is probably why you've been so obsessed with the process rather than the result. But some Joe Blow coming in the door from, I don't know, never stepped foot in an athletic facility, working an average desk job, and you're trying to explain to them about the process, which could become discouraging, right? Trying to lose weight is discouraging. Trying to get healthy is discouraging because not always happening so fast. So how do you get someone so invested in the process?
One of the things that makes a process important is it is tied to a concept that very few people in the world today, both developed and undeveloped, industrialized or not, are aware of, and that's sustainability. I'll use a few examples of why the martial arts, and then why the process is so closely tied towards what we consider the ultimate, which is results, right? When you see results, everyone achieves some sort of result in their life. If we're results oriented, that's why I hate the term of results oriented. That doesn't mean anything. You can have good and bad and high and low results. But the thing about what the martial arts does a great job of, whether it's Taekwondo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, anything else, what that does is it says this is a lifelong pursuit. There's no end, and the beginning was before you even walked in the door, right?
Right.
Because there's varying stages of readiness that a person has to go through emotionally to be ready to develop their process, decide they're going to be better, and decide that they're going to do things that are sustainable in their own life, whatever that means for them. And when you walk in the door of a martial arts school, again, depending on the martial art and then how well that school has come up in their pedigree, then the thing that comes in when they come in the door is, how am I going to continually pursue moving forward and learning within the confines of the core values that either the school has defined or that I've defined for myself. That's an integral part of good martial arts training, because they understand that the tools for self-defense and the tools for emotional discovery and the tools for self-discipline that they're giving people are useless unless those people see it as a long-term lifetime investment. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for example, is real hot right now. It's been real hot for the last decade. It has a higher retention rate than most gyms and most CrossFit gyms. Why? Because when they come in the door, this is a lifelong thing. And everyone accepts that because they look at it and they see old masters with black belts and they see people who spend their entire lives devoted to this. And because martial arts have been around much longer, so there's a history there, right? Whereas when people come in a CrossFit gym, they don't look at Greg Glassman or they don't look at, old strength and conditioning coaches as, oh, well, this is a lifelong thing. The parallel doesn't exist there yet, because of the fact that popularized and generalized strength and conditioning for most people is new, and then in addition the fact that most gyms are run as businesses, not long-term, and so are martial arts schools, but the difference is that they've worked it into their process that this is a long-term lifetime commitment. People come in and out of it, but it's very, very much integrated into what they do. So the parallel that I drew, why I think martial arts are very important in teaching that, is it helps people realize that this isn't something you're going to solve tomorrow, and it isn't something you're going to figure out tomorrow, and it's going to constantly change. Just like you start the martial arts, you know nothing. Midway through the martial arts, you still know nothing, but you know a little bit more, and you're physically able to do a lot of cool stuff, and that's where a lot of professional fighters or even high-level coaches and masters do a lot of their work, and then they really understand everything. Their body's broken and can't do it anymore, so they have to redefine themselves in that process and what their value is to their community and to the world when they can't physically do what they used to do. And their process changes. There's some consistencies there, but it changes because it is lifelong, and that culture has built a place for every single role. Right? Why I believe that is important, whether you're in business or whether you're in a CrossFit gym, is because when you look at results in the world, be they results that are good or bad, everything is sustainable. Bad results are sustainable. One of the things I spend a lot of time doing in one of my entrepreneurial ventures is white-collar criminal investigation and packaging. One of the things you'll find very interesting is a parallel between successful people who do good things and successful people who do bad things is what they do is sustainable. I see a lot of people who break the law on a regular basis who are really, really dumb. They break the law once. I see a lot of people who are really, really smart that break it on a regular basis, and they've never been prosecuted a day in their life. Why? Because their process is sustainable. Maybe not moral, maybe not for the greater good, but what they figured out is what they do has to be sustainable, and what they do has to be a more perfect expression of what it is they're trying to do. Now, in that case, it's a amoral, antisocial activity, whether it's fraud or anything else. But what they are able to do is develop that sustainability, and they pursue that. And in many cases, it's tied in to the same things that make good processes sustainable. Right? Getting more people to believe in it, more people to benefit from it, more people to try it, more people to value it. Right? So, going back to relating that to martial arts and training, what you have to teach people is that this is an ever-ending process that has to have three key things: constant evaluation, constant dedication, right? And then a willingness to question everything and every bias that you have. If you do those three things on a regular basis, you're always going to be getting to the best expression of your process, and you're also going to be real with yourself and able to take the feedback from others. And those are the things that I think, in my background, we were constantly told that you've never learned anything, you never are going to know everything, and that was beat into our heads in the martial arts. And so for me, that's just a part of who I am.
Right.
And I think that the goal of everything that we do here is trying to make sure that if people leave here with nothing else, it's with that concept intact. Because if somebody can leave here with that concept intact, or even if they don't, but they leave here and then they spend enough time doing whatever their next stage of life is, that they'll maybe remember that at the right point and have been exposed to it to where they can take it.
Right. So I guess it's because CrossFit is so young then, right? Based off of your analysis of martial arts and crime, really, because, right, crime goes back a long ways. CrossFit is so new, 10 years, 15 years, that we're kind of in the middle of that process of trying to understand that we don't really know everything, which is kind of what Dave Castro is about, right? Every time he programs a different workout, it's like, oh man, we weren't prepared for that. Well, that's the idea, is to continually understand that we don't know everything. And we're continually not going to know everything. And every time your body adapts to the new movement, there's always something else coming along. I just always have a hard time explaining to the layman off the street how to get them invested in CrossFit into themselves, because the idea of not knowing necessarily everything is scary for people, right? That's kind of what everyone's after. They want to know everything. So being able to throw yourself into a gym and not know everything, it does not sound pleasing, right? So is that kind of where our core values come in? Is that where you, like, everything's about the community around here and our core values to kind of help people make an easier transition? Like, I mean, not everybody, I think, understands that you are definitely integrating physicality within our core values. Everybody feels warm and fuzzy. We have a community. Yes, everything's lovely. But at the same time, everybody's getting really better, right? Mm-hmm. Physically, and healthier, which is what we're about. So what is the secret sauce in keeping people here, right? Once they come in, you don't want them to be kind of scared of all of it. So is the secret sauce your core values? Is that where that comes in, making people feel like they belong?
The secret sauce that I think any successful venture in the gym space, and that just happens to be the example that we're using and how we've chosen to express that here, is giving people a safe environment to initially and continuously be vulnerable. But what changes is the level of vulnerability and the level of safety from things that aren't bad for them that you give them. So when someone comes in the door, they're going to perceive everything as bad. They're going to perceive feeling bad in a workout as bad. They're going to perceive all these crazy people running around as bad. They're going to perceive this guy saying, hey, come be a part of our wonderful community and blah, 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 blah. And here are our core values and all these things that we're going to try to adhere to and be part of and all of that. Well, you have to explain that to people. You want to tell them, hey, come in, just be part of what we're doing. Make sure this is a fit for you. Really try to understand what we're about. And that's, I think, for us here, what we do when we go through our process, our on-ramp process is very detailed. Anyone that's ever come here has gone through that process with me personally. And the coaches that have come through our intern program are doing the same thing. They see how detailed that is, and what they really have an understanding when we're done is who we are, who we're not, what our core values are, and what they can expect from us during the first 1 to 2 months, right? What they can expect from our coaches, what they can expect from the workouts, what they can expect from nutrition, what they can expect from all those things. And then, once they go through that, that's that initial piece where they're being vulnerable. They're kind of pushing their boundary a little bit by being vulnerable with us, but then we're slowly guiding them through that. That, I think, is the most important piece to getting someone to stay initially when they come in the door. But after those first 2 months, the secret to building a long-term relationship with the gym in the CrossFit functional fitness space is slowly stripping away that protection, where you build the adaptation not only physically but mentally and emotionally towards the uncomfortable things that they then use the tools that you've given them to do. They made a big decision to keep coming in the door. Right. You got to protect them through that first couple of months of that decision. Then slowly, and just like the workouts get harder, the emotional interaction gets harder. Hey, okay, you've been here a couple months now. We have to show courtesy. You can't just take that box from the member that's been here 8 years, right? They kind of work around you for a little bit because that's the new guy and we got to figure it out. But now show that respect, right? And what happens is over time, we, as particularly in America, we get really comfortable real easy when we get somewhere for a long period of time. And by a long period of time, I mean longer than 2-3 months, we get comfortable.
Yeah.
Well, what happens when we get comfortable, we start not paying attention to the things that let us in the door. We think the rules don't apply to us. And I'll put that statement on pause there because I think that's the biggest problem with sustainability in CrossFit gyms is instant gratification. CrossFit and this entire space grew quickly because of media, social media, availability on the internet, everything's free, programming's free, all this stuff. It exploded. And what happened is everyone says, hey, I have a right socially to be a part of this because everyone should. Right? Scaling is for everyone. Everyone can be a part of this. Everyone can do this. I can have this because I feel I'm entitled to it. Well, here's the thing. It's available to everyone, but not everyone can access what it can give you unless you're willing to have the process and the discipline. And that's the disconnect. When that harsh reality hits for people, that's when they leave gyms. But I believe that the reason it's sustained very hard for most people to remain in CrossFit gyms or gyms in general, and why most people who touch CrossFit struggle is the owners and the coaches don't see it that way. They don't understand that their long-term relationship with their community, the relationship of the people to that community takes the same amount of work that you're asking from the people who are a part of it. So they think once the person's in the door, good to go, they need to hang here because it's a CrossFit. No, they have to continue not only living to their own values and providing that process, but they also have to contribute to it just as much as the members have to contribute to it. And I think that's the big disconnect. And so dialing that back into when you start taking that away from people and confronting them with the newest stimulus, whether it's in a workout, whether it is starting to hold that new member accountable to the core values a lot more vehemently, if you will. Okay, you know, you can't just go and take Jesse's box. Jesse's been here for a while, and it doesn't matter if Jesse was here 2 days or 2 years or 2 decades. He got there first. You need to wait your turn in line, as an example, right? Or Molly's been here for 5 years, and she's we all love her to death, bless her heart, but she does a lot of things that drive some people nuts. But we're not going to gossip about her. And you've been here 2 years. You know you're not supposed to do that. Well, the 2-month person might start feeling comfortable talking about Molly because everybody talks about Molly because that's just the easy, cool thing to do. So I want to feel like I'm in a social group, and then you confront them, and you're dealing with those types of things on a regular basis. And that's, I think, what causes, whether it's a social thing like that or whether it's somebody going, hey, I just don't feel like I can push that. Okay, well, here's the thing. You've done all these scaled options in this workout for months now. You're fine. You're kind of stagnating a little bit. We need to push a little bit harder. And what that person at that point is doing is not maintaining integrity with themselves on where they're at. And so that's the hard part, is constantly maintaining that and helping them understand, not just saying, hey, you need to do better, you need to push it, and then you leave it. Well, that person isn't going to find their way through that process unless you guide them.
Right. So for a gym that is significantly huge, I would say, for an average CrossFit gym, we have, 200 members. We have 2 facilities with a random facility in the middle, so people know kind of what we're talking about. So you've got Olympic lifting on one side, CrossFit on the other side, you've got StrongFit going on outside. There's only one of you, and you've got all these members going around doing this. So what's your process to maintain that? I know you talked about your coaching staff, but how do we make sure that we keep and hold the standard, I guess, is like the easiest way to say it, right?
So the how we do that here, and there are many different ways to do this, but how we do that here and what we've done is we have a set of core values that we talked about earlier: courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit, family, and faith. Those things drive everything that we do here. So whether we're looking at a training methodology, whether we're looking at someone's behavior, whether we're looking at what we're going to do as a coach, a decision we're going to make it as a gym, we have to evaluate those decisions based on those core values. Then you have to take into account an old organizational axiom, and something that's very important is, how many people can you touch, span, and control? I only have so much time in the day. Yep. When our gym started a couple years ago, I didn't have a need for any help beyond myself and a couple of the coaches that I had. when our gym grew, one of the ideas that I'd always had to implement, and we implemented about 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago now, was having this concept of athlete reps or an athlete council. Those are people who represent the different areas of the gym, class times of the gym, training types in the gym. At the end of the day, yes, we've got CrossFit, weightlifting, we're all just working out. And we have different people who are passionate about different ways of working out and expressing that process and learning discipline and learning how to be better at being a person. And that group exists to do two things. One, hold me and gym leadership accountable and the coaches accountable to our behavior, and two, to help touch and reach out and work with the gym just like my coaches. Some of the athlete reps are also coaches. They are the ones that I maintain the closest relationship with. Those are the people who are tasked with holding other members accountable to their behavior, because each one of those people was specifically selected initially, and then the council continues to self-select itself, and I'm out of that. When I initially picked them, it was a group of people who were influencers in the gym, right? So the same group of people who in any other gym might turn into cliques and tear the gym apart when they don't get along are the people that then I've tasked with, hey, you're responsible for holding these core values, you're responsible for helping me maintain this in the gym and holding me accountable, and I'll hold you accountable. That group of people is responsible for that and has been a big piece in helping maintain that culture. The coaches are also a big part of that. Being a coach here is an extremely hard thing. I've had many coaches leave here because as they start to grasp that role, for whatever reason, it creates conflict either between themselves or the coaches, with them, me, or with other members, because that role is very hard because they have to hold that. Some people are not at a point in their process in their development in life to where that's something that they either value or can do. That's fine. But the council and the coaches are where I've tried to put most of my effort, because those are the people that then go and influence their group of friends who then push that out.
Right.
Now, yes, I still have a lot of people come to me and a lot of people look to me. At the end of the day, if I got asked, hey, Josh, we have a question. I mean, if I had $1 for every time I got asked that for programming or something going on at the gym, or can we do this, right? I'd be a very rich man. But the reality is that what you find when you have a group of people who you've asked to, in fellowship with you and shared accountability, uphold a standard, they will go out and do it, and then what they come to you with is a solution. They come to you with issues, they come to you with solutions, and what they're asking for you to do is enable them. So the primary goal that I have put in place, or have on a daily basis, is to enable the system that I put in place, which is, these are our core values, these are the people that I'm trying to be as close to and enable as much as I possibly can to help me instill those values and hold those values here. And then when they need something, give it to them, and when they need your involvement, give it to them, and maintain those relationships with those people so that then that goes out, and you task them with doing the same thing. When you do that, what you find is you now have a system that goes out, and the key is the small group. So whether you're looking at communism, whether you're looking at any political movement, whether you're looking at a church, whether you're looking at CrossFit, what is CrossFit? CrossFit is an idea with 15,000 little small groups all over the world called boxes, who are taking care of that for Greg Glassman somewhere he's never been. Right? In a gym or in a church or in a business or in a government, you have a lot of small groups that are doing that for someone who's never been where they're at. What we're doing here is, with those core values and with that athlete council and coaches, and then the small groups that go out from that, we're taking the groups in other gyms that turn into cliques and mom clubs and this and that don't provide any value to that gym, and these are people that are then help sustaining, hey, that 9:30 a.m. group of women that's going to take all the meals to the gal that just had a baby, or the 5 a.m. crew that drags that guy that doesn't come in every 2 or 3 weeks, or the evening.
You're not talking about Justin Morrow.
Hey, you got to shout out to Justin Morrow, man, the guy that comes 5 times a year. Or you have a unique class that speaks to a certain demographic of people, and that they hold it a couple days a week, and they come in and they're just really close, and it really has a strong support aspect to it. Those things come from that small group. And when you look at some of the strongest political movements in the world, some of the most sustainable political movements in the world, when you look at some of the most sustainable churches, the most sustainable businesses, they have that small group model. And the only time that you enable that is if you're the person who is decided to take on this mantle of leading and trying to build this. You have to allow that to happen. You have to support that, and you have to let that go and realize that what those groups come up with is the meat and potatoes of what you need to be doing, and go with it, even if it isn't your cup of tea. Because as long as it falls within the vision, the mission, and the core values that you've set, so what?
Yeah, right. Makes it sustainable, right?
Right? And that's the key. And for me, what I look at, and we laugh about this all the time, and we've had many soapbox conversations about it, but my biggest driver is, how can I make this process of making people better that we're doing here sustainable if I got hit by a bus tomorrow? The answer right now is it's on its way. It's not there yet.
Right.
If I wasn't here, we'd still have a lot of problems, and it cannot be that way. We've got to get to where I'm irrelevant.
Right.
And that's what drives a lot of that.
So I know some people always say, I don't want that in my gym. I just want to walk in and work out and leave. Mm-hmm. So people who are in the hunt for a new gym, are they all supposed to be looking for places like ours? Or do they have to figure out what they want first from a gym? Or do people think that they want something, but really everybody wants to should be a part of a community like ours?
The reality is that I will never say that this gym is for everyone. In life, not everyone is going to have the compatibility for the type of excellence and the type of process that we have here. Because there are some people that have been through things and that have value different things, and they're just not going to embrace that. That being said, when someone's looking for a gym to be a part of, to be fit, you can go to any CrossFit gym. You might get some training. But what you need to be looking for is something that is in line with what you think you actually need. And what I encourage people to do is look at what made you look to do that. If what made you look to do that was you got divorced and you decided you needed to look better, and you decided that you wanted to feel better about yourself, or your doctor kicked you in the butt because you're overweight and you're struggling with various markers not being where they're supposed to be, or if you're a high school athlete and you're tired of making third string and not being anybody, there's usually an event in your life that's made it intolerable for you to stay where you're at. Mm-hmm. If that is what's made you want to find a gym, then we're the gym for you, because we're going to do everything we can to give you the tools not only to physically achieve that, but mentally and physically and spiritually achieve that based on what it is you're trying to do with the rest of your life. Because there's a lot more coming than just this initial goal that's moved you off the starting box.
Right.
The other thing that people should be looking for when they go to a gym, and why we're not for everybody, is they need to be looking for accountability. They need to be looking for a group of people that want to help them do this. If you want to come do this journey alone, this isn't the gym for you.
Yeah, right? Black
Right.
Plague is accountability.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
People don't want to be held accountable a lot.
Right. And the reality is that I've gotten, now, I can hear it already. People are going to listen to this podcast, and I'm going to get the text, you let so-and-so join the gym, and they've been training by themselves in that corner for 8 months. You know what? They've been training by themselves in that corner for 8 months, but there's not a single person in this gym who's been training by themselves in a corner for 8 months that by month 4 wasn't involved in some sort of small group and then showed up at the open to hang out, or hasn't been doing it. It doesn't, I mean,
I don't really think there is anybody in this gym, and I'm here a lot.
And there are people who have resisted that process, and guess what? They're not here anymore.
Well, and that's why we say it's the Black Plague, right? You hold somebody accountable for their actions or what they're committed to. And I'm reading Logan Gelbrick's book, Going Right now, and he talks a lot about accountability and how people, for some rhyme or reason, are just not about it. And when you come to a facility that holds you accountable, then it's like, well, those aren't really my goals anyways. It's like, or is it because they're holding you accountable to what you did say? So I think that's why this is a great gym for a lot of people, like you said, in different parts of their life, a divorcee or an athlete or a person who wants to belong or somebody who's sick and needs to get healthy. We have all of those people in this gym, I think, and the reason they have been successful in all of their journeys for health is because you and everybody else holds them accountable.
Well, and I'll add to the black plague of accountability. I think the black plague of accountability, you can throw some napalm on that and make it even worse when that accountability is two directional. Every single person that I can think of, and I'm sure that there are some exceptions to this if I thought really hard about it, but every single person that I know that has left this gym or a gym like ours after going through the process and struggling with accountability didn't struggle with being held accountable. They struggled with being held accountable, and then when their response to that, which is the natural human response, which is to call out either the hypocrisy or the lack of accountability in those who were holding them accountable, and then seeing those people go, you know what, you're right, I'm going to hold myself accountable to that, and move on. Well, then at that point, that's when they have that sobering moment that goes, so person A came to me in fellowship and said, hey, we need to be better about this, I'm going to hold you accountable. And you said, well, hey, person A, you suck at this.
Yeah, right.
And then person A goes out and fixes it, then you realize, I actually have to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or person A goes out, tries to fix it, fails, comes back, apologizes, and tries to make it right. Those are things that people in our society are not, by and large, equipped to deal with.
Why do you think that is?
Because our society, it has three things that make that impossible. Instant gratification.
Which is getting worse and worse as
Right.
time goes on. Technology, right?
Devaluation of relationships through technology. Right? And other mediums. Right? And then this overdeveloped sense of the individual. Right? We are all individuals. We all have our own journey. But at the end of the day, we all start hiding behind, well, this is what's good for me. Well, let me tell you something. That may be what you think is good for you. I can stand there in the cereal aisle freaking eating Cinnamon Toast Crunch all day long, mixing it with my protein powder and saying, this is good for me. But if I do that every day, that's not going to be good for my long-term health. Doesn't matter how much I say that's good for me. Just like treating other people badly, or just like not being sincere or genuine or having integrity isn't going to long-term pay dividends,
right.
No matter what the narrative is you give yourself. And I think that's the challenge that people have now. And when you come to CrossFit gyms, people walk in the door, and there are some great gyms that actually have the same type of goals we have, but what happens is when the person pushes back and says, I just want to work out, what does it matter? I need to pay my money. The answer here is, here's your last month's refund. When you want to be part of what we have here, come on back. That's the answer here. The answer to other gyms is, okay.
Yeah, right.
And that's when the default, anytime that you're part of anything, is you can take it and make it, well, you just need to be professional, or you just need to give me my space, or you don't understand, you need to step back. Everyone is used to giving some sort of platonic / professional arm's length stiff arm whenever it becomes an area that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, right. Vulnerability, right?
And listen, I worked in corporate America for years. You've seen me manage some situations in this gym. I've got all the tools in the world to do a nice and easy, soft, stiff arm, leave me the hell alone.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it that way.
Yeah.
But very rarely do I do that unless I feel that that's something I need to sit down and talk with that person on a more in-depth basis.
Well, right? And I think I've seen you do that with people in the gym when it doesn't line up with our core values.
Right. But
like,
that's also
very rarely, if somebody's like having an issue in the gym, you're willing to help them with tools on how to solve the issue, as long as the person is voluntarily signing in for our core values. Once somebody doesn't meet up with our core values, you do give them the full-on stiff arm.
But we do have to, usually what that is, it might, if the time and the place requires it, you have to be nice about it,
right,
and politically correct, but then you usually have to sit down and have a very candid, loving conversation that's also going to be pretty tough and say, hey, this is what we're about. If you're not willing to be about this, then, this is how it's at. We have a new member who I have a past relationship with in another life that joined, and I had to sit down with this member because I had forgotten to do it after the member had joined, and had a conversation about our core values. and said, hey, I apologize, but this is what we're about. So, this is what I'm expecting of you. And since I have a previous relationship with you, and I know you, and I know what you stand for, I also am going to expect great things from you along those lines. And that person was very accepting of that.
Sure.
But I can also see where that could have gone a different route.
If you didn't have the conversation up front.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, and hey, let's face it, the functional fitness and gym space, it's saturated right now. There's gyms everywhere. There are gyms that are struggling. There are gyms that are failing, and I get phone calls every day. And much to my my brother's chagrin, and probably even some of the members at this gym that would like to see us have even more people than we do. I have conversations every day with people about this is who we are and this is what we're doing, and I get the response of, well, it doesn't matter, I'm paying you, I just want to work out and go home.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be the place for you.
Right.
Because those are the people that can come in and derail progress for people who are actually on a journey towards that process and trying to be better. And we don't have time to allow for those complications that prevent that from moving forward.
Right.
And what I've been real proud about, particularly over the last year, our community is self-corrected and self-sustained and, self-policed in that by and large, and it's gotten stronger and better because of it, because we're a unit of people that are close and serving each other in that regard, regardless of our background financially, regardless of our background politically, spiritually, level of fitness, the whole 9 yards.
Right. So now that you've got your process in place and the gym is now self-correcting, as you said, the last year, and self-sustainable, we're almost to the point at which we don't need you, which I'll never openly admit that I don't need you personally. That's from a personal standpoint. What's next for the gym? What does the projection look like for you? Like, in your mind of ideas, what are we up for next?
So for me, and there are many other gym owners out there, and I want to be very, very clear about that, to gym owners, to even people like Logan and Deuce
Shout
Gym.
out Logan, Deuce Gym.
They have their visions, and everyone's a little bit different. Mine are not tied towards gym memberships and finances and all that stuff. And not to say that those people are. Some people have those goals, some people don't. My goal for this gym is to see us grow to one of the largest communities in Southeast Texas. But what I want to see over the next 2 years is the impact that we have to be apparent, measurable, and unique in what we're doing in people's lives outside the gym. And that goes for all areas. So one of the things, for example, that I would love to see, and I'll map this out in 3 specific areas just for sake of picking 3. We started a partnership with the Phoenix group, which is our sobriety group, and we have a class once a week and a group that's growing. And it's one of the largest participation classes that we have, not only with our in-house members, but with people coming in from the outside. I would love to see that grow into something that is ongoing, to where that is associated with our brand, and because our brand and what we stand for and our core values, in my opinion, because I lived it, are a great way to find recovery. Not the only way to find recovery, but a great way to find recovery. So for me, seeing our gym become associated with that, and see our community of people in recovery that have found not only the Phoenix and what they stand for, but our community and what we can do for others on an ongoing basis, not just folks in recovery, but people struggling with life in general, is one of my big goals. Mm-hmm. There are many great gyms and great processes and ideas out there. You see the great leadership stuff that's coming out of places like Deuce. You see the great competitive stuff that's coming out of places like CrossFit New England and Invictus, and their processes for elite athletes and high-level performers. You see stuff coming out of a lot of coaches out there who are specializing in different areas. Those are all great things, and what I want to be known for is taking high performers from all walks of life and giving them those tools to where when people hear our name, they understand that no matter who I am, no matter what my level of fitness is, no matter what my walk in life is, I can go to that place and I'm going to get the tools that I need, right, to do better in recovery, or that I need to do better in life. Specifically for my competitors, you're one of them. I am blessed right now that the vast majority of the competitors that I coach, they're performing at a high level. I consider close friends. but I would like to see, well, the people that I coach that are my friends won't change. What I would like to start seeing is more competitors going, why am I doing this? And why am I part of a flag that is only focused on this result, right? You know, I want them to seek out what we're doing, not because they want to win the CrossFit Games or win IWF or go get an NCAA scholarship. I want them to come to us because they feel like they're going to find a community that's going to support them before and after that, right? You know, one of the things that I always have pointed out about pro sports is very few pro athletes identify themselves. Very few. Usually it's very high level. It's usually because the public associates them with that. But very few, if you ask them, would identify with their pro flag or how even they made most of their money. Most of them are very close to their collegiate, their parochial, their high school, or their first coach, or what they stood for at some point. And that's what's always there for them. And for me, that's what I want this place to be, whether you're a competitive athlete, whether you're an executive, you know, whether you're, you know, just trying to get in shape and not die, or, you know, like as your mom says, not eat green Jell-O.
Yes.
Right? I want them to associate us with that and, you know, always have that place in their heart as something they go back to as a source of strength, sustainability, and family to deal with whatever it is that's come up in life at that point. That's my goal. And how I intend to measure that is how far we penetrate into those areas and have people who value that. I had a competitor recently here that she's one of our coaches now, and I challenged her when she came to our gym was Camden before she retired, and I told her, I said, you want to come here, you're going to come here and you're going to represent what we stand for, and you're going to go through this process and do what we need to do, and that's what you need to sign up for. And, you know, for me, that's, you know, seeing how her life has transpired, and she's made me very proud with some of the things that she's done over the last couple of months that, you know, she might not have done a year ago when presented with the same situation is huge.
Right.
Those are the types of things that I'm looking for from what we're doing here. And over the next couple of years, I want to see that growth. With that growth, yeah, we're going to have more members. With that growth, yeah, we're going to have a bigger footprint. With that growth, we'll be more financially viable. All of those things.
Sure.
Right? But those aren't my benchmarks for that.
Right.
The other thing that I definitely want to see as well, in addition to all that, is I would really like to see a bigger footprint from a younger demographic in our gym, and by younger I mean under the age of 18.
Are you thinking more CrossFit kids, or are you thinking
I'm thinking
high school kids?
Wouldn't you and I, as individuals, say that part of the reason we're where we're at is because of what we were given as kids?
Definitely.
And I believe that what we're teaching here, people like you and I already had at some level as a kid, which is why we were so, this is what we need to be part of.
Right.
I want more kids under the age of 18 involved with this community and what we're doing, because if we are able to instill this in a bunch of young people who value that process and go forward,
right.
I mean, that's an impact. And that's an impact that is not only sustainable, that is an impact that will pay benefits we'll never even see.
Sure.
I mean, you know, I'm still very close to my family. I'm still very close to a lot of people in my life that knew me as a young person, but they've gotten to see how all that work paid off later, right? Just because they're here. There may be a kid that we work with here for 4 or 5 years that we'll never see again, but we'll never know the impact that we had, but hopefully it'll be good. That's what I want to start seeing is more of that. We have some of that now. We're working with a lot of younger folks who come in over the summer. A lot of parents bring their kids in from time to time, but I want that to be a big part of our community. That's why we don't have CrossFit Kids. I don't believe in training people differently. The kids need to be in here with their parents. The kids need to be in here working out with their parents, or just being part of what their parents are being a part of.
Sure.
I mean, we had a conversation about this at a 12 o'clock class the other day. Someone said they had trouble getting their kids to eat the food they packed for them when they are out and about, but then when they're home or if they're out and about, the kids always want to eat what they're eating. I was like, well, just pack up food for yourself. That's what I did for me and my kids. I just pack up a meal for me, and then they would only eat what I eat. The kids want to do what you're doing. They don't want to do what they're supposed to do. That's the kiddie table. Who wanted to sit at the kiddie table?
Not me. Yeah, no, it's true.
So for me, that's what I want to see is more of 18 and under getting involved with our gym. Because it's honestly, I had a parent this weekend. We did a benefit for a Klein Cane Wrestling down the street. And one of the parents came to me and said, hey, I really want my son to come train with you this summer and have a program focused on them. And I really see the good things you're doing here. But, you know, our current gym doesn't offer that. He doesn't even like to train there. And then he wants to, I'm like, well, wait a minute. So you're in another community, another set of values, all these other things. And then here, you're wanting to have your son. There's a disconnect there. You know? That's why I want to see more people involved with us here doing that. So for me, you know, the involvement at that age group would be where I'd measure it. So between the growth in those specific areas, measuring our impact, and getting more people under the age of 18 involved so that we can get a next generation of sustainability, not only for the gym and our brand and what we're trying to do for the world, but also giving younger people the tools. Yeah. You know, because at the end of the day, it will make more people like old cranky coaches like me have less heartache later when they actually have kids that are now in their 30s that can help them do what we're trying to do and help leaders do what they're trying to do. I've never achieved anything in any company and in any organization anywhere when I didn't find at least one like-minded person that was willing to work themselves to the bone and that saw the process the same way I did, because you can't do anything alone.
Well, and I think it also limits the damage done to kids, right? Most of the time when you see middle-aged people come through here, they have so many other filters already put on their view of athleticism, healthiness, whatever, being vulnerable. If you get them when they're younger, maybe they don't have all those filters already on. You can catch them early enough to say that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to fail. It's okay to try something new, right? And then when they become older, then they are easier to coach and be human beings in the world. I think that's everything. Do you have anything else you want to say? Talk about, since this is your very first podcast?
No, what I think the thing that I'd like to add, just for everyone out there listening, and is the purpose of this podcast and the existence of this gym is to make the world a better place, make people better, and continue to do that. If you look at what our mission statement is and our core values, it's very clear. I'd ask for feedback on what we're doing to see that it supports that, and I would ask for you guys to share and involve people on that. You know, what we're doing has more to do with those things than anything. So to look at this as not just another podcast and not just another way of looking at information for the gym, but to really understand what we're about. If anyone listens to this podcast and has questions about who we're about, you know, come find me, come find you, come, you know, find one of the coaches and talk about it, or reach out, or we can do another one. I think, you know, the goal that I had for this podcast was to really help people understand what we're about, what our process is about. We are not perfect. I am not perfect. There's constant improvement that needs to be done, but this is what our goal is. And, you know, I'm sure we'll get better at doing these and disseminating that information and being part of that, but as we go along. But this is really good, and I'd like to thank you for getting on me to do this and facilitating it. And I'd ask us to end on is actually asking you a question. The question that I'd ask you is, you know, from your perspective, what would you like to see come out of our community and organization over the next couple of years, and where do you think our biggest impact would be, and what do you want to see for yourself? The reason I'm asking you that is I think it's important, since you're such a big part of what we're doing here, and particularly with this podcast and our competitive program. You know, it's important for people to hear that as well. You know, everyone gets to hear me wax eloquent on a regular basis, and that's great, but I think it's also important for people to hear from the people who are actually doing most of the real work, which is folks like you.
Yeah, I think that through the podcast I really hope to achieve, especially I don't know if necessarily the beginning classes really get to hear you talk about our core values, what they mean to you, how important they are, your ideas about where this gym's going to go, as much as the night classes do. But that's just because I'm there. Maybe you do talk to them. So I thought it was a good platform to have everybody be able to hear all the same message. And then I also want the gym, I really like the idea that we're kind of headed, I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it's just maybe the realm that I'm in and that you're involved in, but I really like pushing people to their peak expression. I really like challenging people on thinking about themselves in a different sense than how they currently are existing. And I think your core values line that up quite well, given the fact you had some people maybe even not like that idea and leave the gym, which is okay too. It's not a judgment. I just think it creates a better community, not a CrossFit community. Yes, our CrossFit community is incredible, but a community in general, the sense of being a higher peaked human expression, right? Like, I just can't imagine people existing in the world, getting up, going to work, coming to the gym, going home and going to sleep. I just don't know how people do that in their life, because that's not what we're here for. We're obviously, as our human has evolved over thousands of years, we're continuing to evolve, and I feel like that's shutting that off quick. So I think it's a good space for people to try and push themselves to their peak expression. Like you said, it's a safe zone, right? Like, I don't have, previously in other areas of my life, I was very scared to fail, very scared to try something new, very scared to lift something off the ground thinking I couldn't do it. Now I just think, well, let's try it. Let's see if we can do it, because it's a safe area for me to fail and try and push the boundaries and hold myself accountable to my peak expression, which I want members to feel that way about themselves too, and maybe not think that the perception of me is that I'm not being like bitchy. I'm actually trying to help push people to being the greater level of who they are when I question what they're asking me. You know, I know you always think when people ask me a question and I just kind of give them like a basic answer about, well, why don't you just try it? Then it's like, oh, she said it. You know, it's just kind of like everyone's looking to me to give them the straight answer, which I think the more this goes on, I think more people will become accustomed to doing that to one another, because that's the only way we're going to get better.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm excited for the gym to move that to the next level, really.
Very good.
But yeah. I was thinking for the end of every podcast, you tell me, because I don't, you know, our guests are going to change, but I was hoping that maybe for the end of every podcast we could do like a moment of gratitude and then maybe like a thought-provoking question, because you're really great at those. Like a question that we just end with, and then we'll open it up. I'll ask the next guest, hey, this is what Josh was thinking, and we'll just kind of like steamroll that into the next.
Well, that could get dangerous, because since I know the podcast list, no. So the moment of gratitude that I'll have, I would say that I'll share in this podcast, is specifically to my family, my wife, my brother, my parents. They are the reason that I can do what I do, in more ways than one. And without them, nothing that we have, down to this podcast, would be possible. So I express that gratitude, and that's something that anyone that's involved with this community and that will be involved with this community, and if you're listening to this podcast 2 years from now, as a start of hopefully listening to 100 that we've done by then, you get an opportunity either virtually or in person to thank them for their sacrifice. That is extremely important that you do that, and I thank them for that. The thought-provoking question that I have for the next guests.
And your next guest is Randy Mott, and he's going to talk about the Phoenix program.
The thought-provoking question that Randy can answer, I think he'll do a good job of answering it, and I think that I would have for just anyone listening right now is if you don't derive satisfaction or meaning, and meaning is probably the better word, if you don't derive meaning out of doing something in service to somebody else, is there really a point?
He'll be really good at that answer.
And while Randy will probably be very great at that answer, that's a question I think that we all need to ask ourselves.
Sure.
Because one of the things that I have told every single person who's ever worked for me in the last 8 years, I've told every person that's asked me for advice, I've told every person who's had a challenge in this gym, I've told every coach that's ever worked for me, you can solve pretty much any problem you have by trying to do something good and serve the person in front of you at that moment. It solves almost everything. And if you can't see that, then the question is there a point to what you're doing?
Well, great. I think that is a good ending to your first podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.